Hey everyone, welcome to Aurora Graphics. My name's Grant Dorsey, and today I thought we'd talk a little bit about how we make our vehicle templates for our new design studio. That design studio actually will allow you to create your own templates if, say, like we have a customer, for instance, that does caskets. We have one that does just purely motocross bikes, guys who do just snowmobiles, and they would rather not have all of the vehicle templates that we have to offer in there because it looks like that's the kind of stuff that they do when in fact they don't have anything to do with vehicle wraps. And so the new design studio allows you to create your own templates and not use ours, or you can use them in conjunction with ours. What we need to do is figure out the secret behind creating a single layer template, which I'll show you here in a second, where instead of like in the last video where I showed we had multiple layers on a template, uh, when you use the internet to display this type of stuff, it's got to be all on a single layer, and the parts that you want the graphics to show up on have to be partially transparent, and so they have to be saved out in a PNG format. I wanted to touch on taking photographs of your own separate pieces depending on what it is you do, whether it's t-shirts or baseball caps or whatever it is. And essentially it comes down to the same thing. You want to get the background taken off of the photo so that you can put something that's going to match the rest of your template backgrounds together so that your templates all look consistent. You could see if I tried to use the backgrounds that are on these images here, they would be so random and it would just look unprofessional. The next thing you have to do is separate, once the background's gone, you have to separate all of the negative objects, all of the negative objects. That is everything that's not getting wrapped. And so like on a truck like this, if you're not going to wrap this portion underneath the wheel well, that would be part of the negative objects, as would the wheel and any windows that aren't getting wrapped, headlights, taillights, things like that. Once that happens and you've got the parts that are getting wrapped, the parts that aren't getting wrapped on another layer, and then a background layer, then we'll be able to merge all these together and create the template. And so the next thing to think about is, if you're going to be taking your own photographs, how to get the best results out of your photograph. And so I've got some pictures up here, and you can see if you look at this photograph, the gentleman or lady who was taking the picture squatted down and got pretty straight on to the center of the vehicle, which is a good thing, but they were too close to the vehicle and too far towards the rear. And so you can see this other post sticking up, and none of the stuff is lining up. And so you can also see the rear wheel sticking out down there, or excuse me, the front wheel on the other side sticking out a lot, and you can't see a lot of this one. That's how you can tell that you're not centered up on the vehicle, is if all these things aren't lining up. Whereas like on this Dodge Ram picture, they've got the rear pillars, the front pillars, the wheels are almost lined up, and so this individual was straight on, dead center on the vehicle when they took it. The other thing that you want to think about is, standing up. If you stand to take your picture and you're a tall person like this, you're going to end up seeing inside the bed, and that makes your template look bad. Whereas if this one was straight across, it would look much cleaner in your template setup. The other thing to think about is contrast on the body and color. So if you're doing t-shirts, you may not want to take a picture of a white one. It would probably be better to take a picture of a red one based on how, or a blue one, whatever, some color, not black and not white. That way you get the best contrast to display the artwork correctly. A super white vehicle like this that has a humongous amount of shine on the front where there's no definition, that's going to make a bad template. These big shadows that are cast across the vehicle is, reflections of trees in the windows. It's going to make a horrible looking template on your design studio. Same with this vehicle here. They've got all these reflections of, like lines on the road, and there's a couple people standing in there, and whatever this is going on back in the background. And so those are going to make your design look different. And so these are all things that you're going to want to think about when you go to take your pictures of whatever it is. The other way that you can avoid the lens distortion, where you see the wheels underneath, or like this where you're just too close. This individual here stood way far back when they took the picture, and that makes it easier to get straight on, and it also gives you less lens distortion. And so with those things in mind, we can go on and start to discuss exactly how you do this. And here's just a couple of examples before we get going, so you can kind of see where we're headed with this. Whoops, I'll just take that layer back off for a second. You see this is one layer, And the checkerboard back there is actually designated that that's transparent, at least to a certain degree. And I believe 40% transparency is what we use. And so you see, if I dump a color back there or put artwork back there or whatever, it's going to display that. And it's going to do it properly with the correct highlights and shadows as close as you can get them. Now you can tell that this was our original color here, and this is the color that it displays. It's darker in some areas and lighter in other areas. And so that contrast is very important whenever you're taking your photographs. So like if this was a pure white t-shirt, which it was originally, it takes a lot of using the levels tool and things like that to adjust it to get it to display properly. If you take pictures of a black vehicle, it's more difficult to get the contrast correct. If you take pictures of a white vehicle, again, it's very difficult to get the picture correct. You know, medium tone colors are better. Also, you want to watch for sunspots if you're doing vehicle wraps. You know, like if you're taking pictures of vehicles, huge sun glares will really affect the way the graphics look on the vehicle as well. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these. And here's the template I'm going to be using. Now, the first thing I want to do whenever I'm making one of these templates, most cameras now take humongous pictures, even cell phone cameras. You can kind of see the lens distortion in here, by the way, because the person taking the picture wasn't far enough away. And this is still a good looking template. It's going to work. They were dead center. There is a little bit of distortion in it though. So the first thing I would do when I opened up this picture that you had just taken or that you got down off the internet or whatever is take my crop tool here, and what I'm going to do is come in just outside the bumper like this, and just outside the bumper like this. And if it was a t-shirt, you would come in and just leave a little gap on either side, you know, a mailbox or whatever it is that you're wrapping. If you wanted to do just a gas tank on a motocross bike or something, you could crop it down to where you're just close to the gas tanks. So, you know, however you want to crop it down to the area that you're actually going to be showing a wrap. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way till I touch at the very top of the template and all the way till I touch at the very bottom. And then if I hold shift and alternate, it will expand out from the center perfectly. And so now I know that this truck is dead center on the document. The next thing I'm going to do is double click this layer, and then I'm going to right click it and duplicate layer. And now we've got the original copy down here. And then I've got a copy that we're going to work on as the next one. And you always want to leave a copy of the original in case when you're deleting the background or something like that, you can go back and just select a big area, copy it and paste it, and then merge it to the area that you screwed up. And that will allow you to, you know, just essentially step backwards if you don't have enough undos to get back there. So on this copied layer, you see I've turned off the other. The next thing I like to do is take something that's really contrasting to the vehicle and the color itself and the picture in general. Normally, solid red works well because there's not usually a lot of red in photographs of templates unless the car's red, and then you may want to use a blue or something. So what I'm going to do is I've made a new layer here, and then I'm just going to use Control Backspace to dump that full of red. And so now whenever I delete, so I'm going to select the marquee tool here and just take off a bunch of this stuff at once. And so when I delete that layer, it should show me red behind it. And that way it's real easy for me to tell where I'm going. Just going to move this square around and delete most of the bulk of what I got here. All right. And if you just hit the letter F on your keyboard, whoops, it'll toggle between full screen. And I just use the hand tool like this, and that'll allow you to push the vehicle clear off. And if I hold alternate, I can scroll wheel into a specific spot, hit the hand bar or the space bar, and the hand comes out, and I can pan around the vehicle without it trying to stay centered up on me. If I tried to do that with just a regular window, it would want to shove this side of the vehicle up against that edge, which makes it really hard to delete the background. And so going to the full screen mode is definitely necessary to get a good template here. And essentially what I'm going to do is just grab my lasso tool, and I like to start at a crook in something like this rather than take off in the center, because inevitably you end up with a what looks like a stair step right here. If you just take off and try to come right into this, when you come back and meet right here as you come back around, whoops. So like, let's say I did that, and then I'm going to come back in here and try to connect with this line. Inevitably, I'm going to get a tiny little stair step right there where the two come together. And so if we zoom in here, it looks like it's straight, but there will actually be a value difference in how much the alias is on one or two of those pixels, and it'll look bad. So it's better if you start coming in from a crook or something like that, a good start and stop point. And I'm just going to go right over this. And you notice I'm zoomed in more than 100%. Oh, the other thing I didn't talk about was how big the picture should be. When they come off of these cameras, they're normally huge. And so once you've got it cropped like this one's already about the right size. I'm going to hit Control, Alternate, and I, and that's going to give me my image size. And you see it's about 1100 pixels. And so on our editor, you need to keep your vertical and horizontal dimensions under 600 pixels. Like 600 is the max, and I would suggest, vertical and width about 600. All the ones that we create are 300 tall and 600 wide. So what I like to do is start with a document that's about double that size, and that way once you get your template made, you get to shrink it down about half scale, which will increase the quality. So like if I'm double the scale while I'm taking the background off of this, as I go around, the anti-alias in things may not be exactly perfect, or I may not have hit my marks exactly right, but when you shrink it, all that stuff disappears. Now, if you have a humongous picture, in order to get the detail that you need, you're going to have to zoom way in, and it'll just take forever to get around the entire image. So like I said, around 1200 pixels, 1100 pixels, something like that. Even 800 will work, but it needs to be bigger than what the final one is going to be, your final template. And so again, I stopped right here at the bottom of the tail light so that whenever I came back in and started my new selection, I wasn't trying to land in the middle of a giant flat area. And that's important to be able to make these look nice. And I'm not going to show you or make you sit through me doing this entire vehicle. Notice again, I started and stopped in a crook, hit delete. The one thing I did want to show you is when I come to these wheels, I get out the elliptical marquee. If you just hold this down, it'll fly out a window, and then you can select that and then let go. And I'll take my crosshairs right here in the center of the wheel, and I'll click, and then after I've clicked, I've got a circle coming out here. I'm going to push Shift and Alternate at the same time, and now my circle will grow from the center perfectly. And so I can get it perfectly round and almost exactly the size of the wheel already. And you see the distortion in the lens. I'm getting a little bit more tired here, so this isn't a perfectly round wheel based on the picture that was taken. So I right click in the selected area and click Transform Selection. Now I can actually warp this over and distort it in order to make it fit where I need it to fit. And it doesn't really need to follow around the top here so much as we're looking for at the very bottom corner here, we get a nice smooth line following the wheel around until the stop of this wheel, in fact. So that's all the further, because you see we have to, when we're removing the background, we're going to actually come into this wheel. And so as long as I'm as close as I can get it here to being around the edge, let's see if just scaling it will work. And that's pretty close because we're touching right there and we're touching right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Here's another thing. If your transform doesn't work like this, where I'm stepped back to a perfect circle again, what you can do is just line it up at this corner here and come down to wherever it meets, probably about right there, and erase that. So I'm going to select inverse. That's going to select everything but the wheel. And so when I come in with my eraser, notice I've got a round eraser. I've got my hardness all the way up, and the diameter is fairly small so I can get in here. And now when I erase, it's going to come around this wheel just like this. And then what I can do is switch back to my marquee tool, and clicking out here away, remember we're selected outside. If I try in here, it's going to get rid of the selection. So I'll step back, and I'm just going to scoot this over just a little ways like that. And now I'm going to start erasing here and stop at the wheel. Try to get that rounded off as best as you can. And then once you're to the wheel, back to the marquee tool, and you just scoot this selection over there to that wheel. And now we're going to erase from here to the body. And then it's back to the lasso tool. Get rid of the old selection and just start clicking by. And I'll just get over here to the other wheel and I'll show you how we did that again, just in case it was confusing. So again, using the elliptical marquee tool, we're going to start, put the cursor as close as we can in the center, hold shift and alternate, and click and drag out a circle. Get it centered on here. I can make it almost all the way around. Let's see if I can just scale this one. Right click, transform selection, and now we'll take our eraser. Oh, whoop, we need to select inverse, remember. See, now we're selected outside. And I'm just going to get as close as I can in there. Come around to this wheel. Go back to my marquee tool. I just hit the letter M and it jumps to marquee tool, whichever one you had selected last. If you hit the letter E, you get the eraser. We'll just come in there like that. And so that's how to do the wheels. Essentially, to get around the rest of the body, we're just going to be using the lasso tool, and I will go ahead and make that a little quicker for you. All right, so now that we've got the background up here, what we need to do is make a duplicate of it. So just right click in the layers palette here, somewhere over the text, and click duplicate layer. And then I'm going to turn off the version of the truck that's not going to get messed with. That is the one that has no background. You can even label that right here by double clicking and just put no background. And so on this one, select, deselect. I'm going to hold spacebar to use my hand. The next thing we need to do is go in here and remove everything off this vehicle that is not going to get wrapped. So this part of this plastic mirror right here, that's normally the ABS plastic. You know, it's real strong, it doesn't break, it bends, but it's almost impossible to get stuff to stick to. So you would want to represent this logically, like it's actually going to be installed, and not wrap that. And so that, and the windows that aren't getting wrapped, these logos, the headlight, tail light, like I said earlier, all that stuff's got to go. You notice I did leave a little bit of the gray here. That we use a neutral background because it helps the graphics pop if there's any color in them. It's something I suggest that you do, and because of that, I don't have to worry about this. If we weren't going to use a gray background, I would come in here and just use a square like that to knock that off, and now it looks normal when you get your background behind there. If you were going to use a color or something, or if that was the road showing through your picture, something like that. So anyways, let's start with the wheels here. I like to get those out of the way right away. This is super easy. Again, we're working on the copy of our layer, not the original. And so this time when I come into the center, I'm actually eyeballing the outside rim of the fender here to try to get as close to that curve as possible without clipping off a piece here or something like that. And then once I've got this large cylinder, I can just hit delete, grab it and move it down, hit delete. And that way you can get right in there. You could also use the eraser if you prefer. It just is a little easier, I think, with the marquee tool to get something that's the right size. So, whoops. What I'll do here is click and drag this over, then hold spacebar and drag and click. And once you get the hang of this, you can do it pretty fast. We can normally knock one out in about 15 minutes from a raw picture to ready to upload. But we've done a few thousand, so. All right, back here on the tail light, we're back to the lasso tool. This is the tool you use most. Here's a little trick. Deselect that. If you grab your eraser, you could use the marquee tool as well and get your diameter. Like I'm using my scroll wheel to hold it up there and see if it's about the right curvature. And then you can delete that curve. Then you can right click and make it smaller, come in here and delete this curve. And then when you go to your lasso tool, you can just do the straights with it. And that'll be easier. You can cut the corners and not try to follow around. Same with this. I'm going to start up here, drop down almost parallel, and then come right inside and click again. And now I can stretch it way out because it's pretty straight. And if it looks like the lens is curving, you're going to have to take shorter bites. You know, if you've got a lot of lens distortion in your picture. And so now when I'm up here, I can just double click and it'll shoot back to the beginning. Now, if I would have started down here, it would have missed that corner. It would have chopped right through it and I'd had to make another selection. So that's why I started at the top. Let's go ahead and hit delete. Control D deselects to make sure you don't have anything selected. Then I'm going to go back to my eraser to hit curves. And again, this doesn't have to be exactly perfect. But if you can move quick and get it really close, you might as well give it a shot. And so the next thing, I'm going to start right here at the front nose, off in the middle of one of those circles. And now I'm just going to follow the paint all the way around. Get here, jump, go here. And so again, spacebar to move around, and you're pretty well just panning and clicking right along that paint break. And then once you get down here, I'm going to double click and close the selection. But you notice we've got a painted portion of the mirror right here that I would like to wrap. And so if I hold alternate, you see I get the minus sign here on my little cursor. Now that minus sign, you only have to hold it until you click the first time. And now you can let go of alternate and it'll continue to let you make your selection around like that. And so now we've subtracted that from the selection. So when I hit delete, it'll leave it. Now if I step back, you could also do that with these pillars if you were going to wrap them, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit delete on that. And it's the same thing for the rest of these. I'll go ahead and speed this up so you don't have to watch it. Okay, so now we've got the background and the negative objects removed. And so what we're going to do now is turn on our other template. And you notice all the negative objects pop right back into place where they're supposed to be. So without moving anything, we're going to hold control, and you see I get that little square when I hover over the picture. That's going to allow us to load selection on this layer. And the other way is, so if I just control click it, you'll see it puts a marching ants all the way around the vehicle. Now the other way to do that is to, I'll just deselect it real quick, is you can select this layer and then go select, load selection, and it's going to ask you, do you want to load selection on this layer, that channel, no BG? And we click OK. And so what it does is select that layer. And once you've got that, then we're going to hold control again. And this time we're going to hold alternate as well. And you see I get a minus sign in that square. And that's going to subtract the paint from the selection. And so now, if I turn this off, you can see we're selected just where the headlights are, not the paint. And so we subtracted the paint from the body. And so now, while we're on this layer, we're going to hit edit copy. And then with the selection still there, hit edit paste. And that should paste your negative objects right exactly where they were copied from. So if we turn off the no background truck, or even turn off the negative objects, you can see that nothing changes. If I move this just a hair, let's just nudge it over 1-2 pixels. So if this doesn't paste perfect and I turn it off, you can see a jump back and forth from the original. And so what you can do is nudge it a couple times and turn it off and see if it moves. Nudge it again, Now it's not moving when I turn it off. So you just nudge it around if it's not exactly perfect, and now it's there. And so we've got our negative objects on a separate layer. The next thing you want to do is come up with your background. We've got, let's see here, desktop. These are the colors that we fade from on our backgrounds. There's a lighter gray down here and a darker gray up here. If you want to know exactly the colors, I can tell you real quick. The lighter gray is this RGB value right here, 84, 85, 85. The darker gray at the top is 48, 48, 48 in the RGB. And so if you want to mimic this, you can use exactly those colors. So what we're going to do here is close that. Internet doesn't support them, and you can't just delete the body because it would just look like a vacant hole with no lines. And so what we do is we just reduce the opacity, and you can watch it go. And I normally get around 40%. You know, it's not exact science, but you notice a lot of times I'll use red as this background. You know, you see I've got this red layer behind there. The reason why I use red is because it's the easiest to tell if it's out. Like if you put blue or something back there, it's kind of difficult to tell if your template's too bright or it's too dark or whatever. But usually red will show if it's pink or if it's like maroon very easily. And because this truck is too light, here I'm going to right click and duplicate this so we have the original. And then I'm gonna show you how to adjust this one to make this pink come through. Remember, our opacity is at 41%. So under image adjustments, we're gonna go to our levels. And because I want to make this darker, I'm going to grab the black slider on this top section here, and I'm going to start moving it over. And you can see in these dark areas, I'm starting to lose my body lines. And so I can't really go too far. And if you notice this big spike in the graph, that's where the body lines are falling off. And so what we've got to do is adjust the midtones, and then maybe we can bring in some more highlights. And you can just keep playing with this until it looks like what you want it to look like. And then you can reduce your opacity yet more if you think it's going to help. And then that's essentially your template. Now, if I turn this off, we can turn on our original. We'll go to full opacity here just so I can show you the difference. So what we did, this was the original body, and this is what our modified body after we did the levels tool on it, that's what it looks like. And so you can see how much contrast you need between the highlights and the dark spots at a low opacity to get that look. And again, this template isn't perfect. It would have been better to have that's why I say don't use white or really light gray like this, and don't use black. If you get a medium tone color like red or blue or whatever, just a regular medium gray, it'll work out a lot better for you trying to put color back behind it. And so that's the reason why I did this, was just to show you that. Also, if you just select a layer like this, if you've got the pointer tool out, you can just hit the number 4 and it'll automatically put it to 40%. So I like that. I'm going to go ahead and leave mine at 50%. The next step that you want to do is to select all. Whoops. Select all, and then what we're going to do is edit, copy, merged, and then I'm going to save this out as the full-size template that I made. So I'm just going to, I've already saved it. So now that we've copied all of those layers that were visible into one, I'm going to get a new document, and it automatically goes to the size of what's on the clipboard. So then we'll paste in there, just edit, paste. You can see I pasted 2. The next step here is you could have added a drop shadow if you wanted to. That's pretty simple stuff. I'm sure you guys know how to do that. The next thing you're going to want to do is to go to image size, and what we're going to do is take our longest dimension down to 600 pixels. And you notice I've got constrained proportions, and my resample is set to bicubic sharper, best for reduction, because we don't ever blow anything up around here. If it's not too big enough to start with, you got to start over and make it bigger. So we're just going to go to 600 here, and you notice our height is at 520, and we want to be at 300s, but we can't squish the image, so we'll just change it to the biggest dimension to 600 and click OK. And then what we're going to do is go image, canvas size, and now on our height we can switch that to pixels, and we'll change this to 300. And so what that's going to do is crop it down vertically. And so this is why it was very important in the beginning when we used our crop tool and expanded out from the vertical top and bottom of the vehicle and got it dead center in the image. If you don't do that when you do this crop, you could potentially chop the wheels off or chop down into the top of the vehicle, and that's also why I saved a copy. So we're just going to put it to 300 and click OK. It says it's going to clip some of the image. We just say OK and proceed because that's what we planned on. And there's your vehicle template. File, save as, and we're going to save it as a PNG. Whoops, PNG right here. And you can see the other two templates I was showing you are PNGs as well. And we'll just call this Ford truck. If you wanted to associate the year of the vehicle with it, that would be fine too. And there's our finished template at full scale. You can see down here we've got 100% in the corner. So that's our template. And if I get a new layer and stick it back there, you can see that it looks very nice. Because I edited it at a larger scale and then shrunk it down, you can't see any problems around the edge. If I would have shrunk it to this size and then tried to edit it, there would be a lot of problems. So anyways, guys, once you've got this saved as one layer and you can see the checkerboard back there, you saved it as a PNG. It's not white or black or anything like that. And it's saved as a PNG as a single layer, maximum size of 600 pixels in either direction. It's ready to be uploaded to the website. I really appreciate you guys joining me for this, and if you have any questions or anything, feel free to give us a call. If you'd like to leave some comments down below, I'll go ahead and answer the questions there too to help out other people who may be watching the videos. And I really appreciate you guys hanging in here for this one. We'll talk to you next time.